Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are two doctors, two researchers, two spouses, two lovers, and two incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We've had an exciting episode last time with the Louders. And for those who haven't listened to that one, this is part 2. So you might want to go listen to part 1 first, last week, where they introduced themselves. She was served a 5-year prison sentence in federal prison, and just some of the things that she learned from that. And also her husband learned while he was waiting for her. So this is part 2. We're excited to share that with you, and we're going to just jump right in here. I love this story, by the way. This is way more compelling because I heard a few things on Instagram and trying to get to know you a little bit, but this is so good. Anyway, all right, go on.
Well, so what was surprising to me was the humanity of people in prison, because before I went to prison, I thought only bad people go to prison. Then I get to prison and I'm thinking, I'm in prison and I'm not bad. I have some good qualities. I've made some mistakes, but now here's where I'm grateful for my parents' non-traditional upbringing. My parents really didn't follow the crowd, and they taught me that I didn't have to follow the crowd. And so I was able to kind of walk alone. I remember telling the girls in prison, I'd be like, the world is cheering us on. We have to succeed. And they look at me like, nobody wants us to succeed. What are you talking about? You know? And I think that I believed that. And it was a decision that I made that it wasn't going to help me not to believe that. And it kind of guided me. I felt accountable to the fact that I was going to improve my life. And so I meet these women. It's unbelievable. I remember I worked in the reentry department and I had this girl. She was a funny girl and she would come down and talk to me every day. And she was nervous about going home. So one day she says, Louder, I'm leaving in a month. And I said, man, I'm going to miss you. You got your resume ready? Are you ready to go home? I said, are you going to be going home to your folks? And she goes, oh, no. She said, no, my dad can't take care of himself. And my mom died a long time ago. I said, oh, I'm sorry. Did she die while you were in prison? And she said, no. She said, my mom was a drug addict. She lived on the street. And she even started to pimp me out when I was 11 years old. And then I went into foster care.
Wow.
She said she never got it together. So she didn't ever get custody of me. She went to prison. And then she said she ended up dying. And I was there with her the day that she died. And she said, I remember looking at my mom and she was so broken. And I just said, Mom, you don't have to suffer anymore. I'm doing okay, Mom. Forgive yourself and let it go. And I'm crying. I'm sitting there crying because I can't even imagine somebody going through that. And she looks at me and she goes, it's okay, honey. I have a beautiful life. Don't feel sorry for me. She goes, I got my GED in prison. Everything's okay. And I'm just like blown away. I was in such a position to be of support. My life, which I thought had been kind of hard, was nothing in comparison to what these women had experienced.
Right.
It really changed me. I started finding this purpose in my life. The world just doesn't understand. If they could see what I see, they would understand differently. And they would want to welcome people home, and they would understand the strength that they have to even survive what they've been through. And so this purpose started to form. I had no idea what the future would look like before I left prison. I mean, I was a photographer. I knew I wasn't going to be engaged in real estate. I worked so hard as if the thought of coming back and working as hard as I had didn't seem that appealing to me, and I was nervous about it, but I just kept focusing on doing the next right thing where I was in prison. I wrote classes and taught classes to women in prison. I supported women where I was.
What kind of classes did you write and teach?
I wrote a class about teaching girls to write a mission statement. We talked about the hero's journey and basically reframing and how to focus on their thoughts. And we talked about triggers and setting healthy boundaries, assertive communication. I wrote 2 curriculums. I wrote one on photography, and that was when I first got to prison, and they let me teach that. It was like the basics.
Did the prisoners have access to cameras?
Well, I was really lucky because my boss at the prison I was at let me take it and use it for the class. They didn't have access to cameras, but it was more the fundamental But then I could teach them the fundamentals by taking pictures and putting them up on a screen. So that was really cool. They didn't let me do that at the second prison I went to. But the interesting thing is photography is about beauty, external beauty. And probably about halfway through my sentence was the perfect time for me to start focusing more on internal things. And so I wasn't really as focused on taking pictures. I was focused on this soul work that we were doing. And so that's when I wrote this other curriculum. And what's cool about it was usually in prison, you're required to go take classes. My class wasn't required. They could just come if they wanted, and it was packed. Like, they loved these.
I bet.
So I found a whole new purpose, and I didn't know what I was going to do when I came home from prison. I just knew that's right where I was, the work I needed to be doing as I worked on my own integrity and then with these girls. And I just love them. I just love them so much. Like, honestly, by the end of my sentence, there's a couple of things that were really profound. One, I really liked myself. I remember looking in a mirror and saying, I've never felt better about myself, you know? And that was really special because there have been so many years that I hadn't. I left prison feeling very free and very full. And I had been transferred back to California, and I was at a camp. I was actually doing time with Macy, who's the girl I met from Utah, who told me that I was at war with myself. And the day that they called my name over the loudspeaker, you wait for that. And you wait for that. And I'd waited a long time, and Macy came up and gave me a hug, and she said, congratulations, Portia, on becoming an amazing person, which was really cool because I had taught this class about becoming an amazing person. And she gives me a hug, and she starts to cry, and I start to cry. And then I walked out of that prison, and I had this box, and it had everything important. And I realized I'm just a woman on the planet. Like, I've never felt richer. I have these letters. I have these experiences. And when I walked out of the prison, all the women came running out cheering for me. They're like, we love you, Portia. We love you, Miss Portia. And I never felt so full, you know? And then this amazing, cute cowboy guy is waiting for me outside. And I was so excited and nervous, but really excited. Chad is so grounding for me. And I was really scared. Like, after 5 years of living in a compound, I'm getting in a car now. And he just held my hand and handed me some strawberries because I love strawberries.
Oh. Chad, can I go back for
Yeah.
just a minute and then we'll continue on from there? Chad, during this, it ended up being 5 years, right? About
Yeah,
5
just-
years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your experience during that time.
Oh, wow. What an experience. We had so much support from our community, neighbors and family, and just at every turn, people that were supportive. It was awesome. I focused on being involved with the kids, coached every soccer team I could, every baseball team, just, try to be as involved as I could with them. And just a day at a time. It was too overwhelming to think about 4 years, 5 years. But
How often were you able to communicate with each other and in what ways?
we were able to,
They let you email back and forth. Here's the thing though, like, I feel like I got so excited to get your emails, or we only talked on the phone 4 days a week for 15 minutes, but every time it was like amazing. Like, I just felt so much love for you, really connected to him, even though we were so far apart. And I remember this woman who came into prison, and her husband, I think she reached out to you because she was coming to Minnesota and she read my blog. I was blogging from prison, and she goes, I know your wife is at this prison. She was coming in on a tax charge, and she goes, I'm hoping I can connect to her. Well, of course, Chad lets me know when she came, we were ready for her, and we, helped her out. But I was eating breakfast with her one morning, and she looked at me and she goes, your husband loves you so much. And I said, his love for me is sacred. I said, that is my strength. And I said, what Chad believes in me gives me so much strength in this situation. And it really was. It really was. His choice to love me and believe in me has changed our family's life and my life in ways that, and he's very humble, but his strength in supporting us has been such a gift. So,
Did you have times, Chad, during that almost 5 years that you didn't know if you could keep doing it? Or were you that strong cowboy that were resolved and
You
Yeah,
just kept
I
moving
did
forward.
always that we would get through it. We were gonna do it. Because like every day that we advanced, it's like, well, we're another day closer. We're through the rough stuff, which wasn't always true, but
Yeah. That integrity that you both had to be loyal to each other during that whole time is pretty incredible
Indeed.
and probably very unusual, I'm guessing. I don't know. What's your experience with that, Portia?
Well, people always say that. They're like, well, your husband wasn't faithful to you. And I was like, my husband was faithful to himself. I know my husband would have never cheated on me because I know that my husband's own integrity to himself comes before it does to me. And I know he didn't. So whatever, like it doesn't matter what anyone else. People don't think that a man could do that. But I already know that I know my husband.
plus we had 5 kids I was taking care of.
I kept him busy. Somebody
Fine.
said that to me.
Yeah.
I spoke at a women's conference and she said, your husband's story to me, he's the strong one.
Right.
Yes, you're right. And she goes, the only reason he stuck around is you left him with so many kids and loves to be. I'm like, oh, that's partly true. He was pretty busy with kids.
So did you email every day then?
Yeah, that was turned out to be a really positive thing. Just I pretty much started my day. I'd go to work and compose an email to Porsche and just tell her how I was feeling and tell her, how much I missed her and stay connected that way.
That leaves quite a legacy for your family, right? You've got those emails still?
I hope not.
We do.
No,
No, we do. Well, and what ended up happening too, obviously, is I wrote my book, which has a lot of the communication with me and the kids and all of that. And I think it does leave a legacy for our kids. It was painful to go through together, but I'm so proud of them. And I also was blogging, so I would email home my experiences. And it was interesting when I went back through and looked through all my blog that I could really see the growth. Like it was kind of cool. When I wrote my book, I had this content. I didn't know I would do any of that. Like I wasn't doing it for the purpose of writing a book.
Yeah.
But honestly, when I got home, my heart was so full. I thought I have to share these experiences. And so,
Yeah. So what do we do? How do we teach ourselves and other people to make all these fundamental changes without dragging yourself through this terrible mud? That's really the question of the day, right? Is how do we learn to do this on our own without this terrible trauma?
right. I think principles, like for one, I know I'm the best version of myself when I'm humble. And I think I've learned that a lot from Chad, but being humble enough to be not right, if that makes sense, to say, okay, let's say that our marriage is struggling. We both had those times, right? And like when I called Chad and said, maybe we should just get divorced. Like it's gone on too long. It's too painful. Chad could have said, you have drugged me through all this. You deserve to rot. Like he could have been so angry. And instead he said, please forgive me for my part. And I was doing all kinds of wrong things. Like he didn't focus on what I was doing wrong. He was focusing on what he had control of. That took a lot of humility and being objective, right? Like separating that self-awareness that you're talking about. Chad's taught me this. First of all, live your life by your decisions. But also I look at what I want the outcome to be. Like I wanted my marriage to work. So if you want your marriage to work, then you can actually write down those things that are important to you and you can live your life by those principles. You will have to challenge your emotions because we get stuck in those collusions of thought and feelings that are so strong and powerful. I had them. I felt very victimized by the government. I felt very angry by the government. I actually sat outside under a tree for months and I processed that. And then I had conversations. This sounds crazy, but I would sit there on this bench and I would have a conversation with my judge. And he wasn't there, obviously, but it helped me process. I was like, this is how I feel. And I really wish I wouldn't have handled it this way. And I want to tell you that I am responsible for my actions. Like I had to go back and kind of rework through all of that stuff because I had strong pathways of being a victim. And the emotional experience of being sentenced and separated from my family and the years of pain and trauma, for me to work through that, I really had to challenge my thoughts and my feelings and be very deliberate in what I wanted my life to look like. In any situation, you want a different outcome, you're going to have to work at it, but it'd be worth it.
I want to ask, during those times when you didn't want to take the responsibility and you wanted to put it on other people, did that not feel good to you to
Oh,
externalize it? Did it kind of give you a rush to feel
absolutely.
it's
Oh, you
someone
mean when
else's
I
fault? It's not my fault. I feel really good sitting here blaming other people. Like that's a real thing,
oh
right?
yeah,
Human nature.
it's human nature. But besides that, we did it in groups. Like there's a whole bunch of us sitting in a circle and we're getting each other and we're just laughing and talking and you feel an artificial sense of power, right?
Because
Yeah.
you're allies.
Going with that. But I remember walking into the library one day and I looked at one of those women and she was smart. She was a political science professor. And she was about 68 years old. And I looked at her and I saw such weakness in her. And I thought, oh no, I can't go sit by her anymore and do this. I have to get up and I have to go outside and I have to fight my way out of this. And it was very uncomfortable. It was much more comfortable to go sit in the library and laugh and talk about how rotten the government was. But I wasn't going anywhere. I was stuck there.
But
And
she
go
hadn't
ahead.
learned it though. She was still stuck.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of people stuck.
She was
I
still
actually
stuck in
couldn't talk.
prison.
I couldn't stay stuck anymore. I had to separate myself and start. Yeah, I had to do something different. And it was very uncomfortable. It's much more comfortable to sit in that victim.
Well, and I want to just take that moment because this is so important. We can be very intelligent people and still totally be clueless, blindsided
Right?
by our own problems.
Our own
Right.
part.
And we can't ask this simple question, 3 words that make a marriage thrive. It's not "I love you." It is, "Am I wrong?"
Am I wrong? Right? Here, the shift for me that was so helpful was that I started seeing power. I felt very powerless, right? And I started seeing truth as power and I started seeing responsibility as power. And so I was very driven to have power back in my life. I felt really imprisoned when I got to prison. I was already imprisoned before I got to prison by my thinking, by my, not taking responsibility for my life, by being a victim. I freed myself in prison. Like by the end of my prison sentence, I was way freer than I'd ever been in my life. And I will never give my power away again by making excuses and blaming others.
I love that.
We talk a lot about power on here. And
I love that so much.
I think most people don't even recognize power that's happening and how we keep giving away our power through
Right.
comparisons, through letting other people make choices for us, through
Right.
letting our circumstances dictate what choices we make. In your case, you were in a bad financial situation. You'd gotten yourself in
Yeah.
drug addicted circumstances. All of those things took away power from you, right?
See, I have felt weakness and I was very driven to find strength. And Chad would say I've always been strong. In some ways I have. I think that's kind of a gift for me as the oldest child. I'm stubborn and I'm hardworking and strong. But when I look back at pictures of myself before I went to prison, I see my weakness. I see it and I don't feel that anymore. And that freedom comes through truth. So
I love that. It does. And responsibility, truth and responsibility, you said.
How did your children
I was going to ask that.
yeah,
too.
how did your children
How did they fare?
handle this?
Well, it was really hard. I mean, I left when our younger kids were 7, 12, and 14. So, and it was hard for everybody. Hard for Chad because he felt like financially he wasn't able to give them what they deserved. We lived in a pretty high-end community, so we had a lot of support. We were fortunate, but also kids didn't have any friends that had parents that were incarcerated.
Right.
And all of their friends were going on vacations because their parents were financially stable. And literally we were completely broke. Chad had to start over and rebuild. And so he felt bad about that. I remember they came out to visit and he just said, I just feel like I'm not doing enough. And I just looked at him and I go, Chad, you're doing everything. And I remember telling him, I said, you don't see it, but our kids will be strong because of what they're going through. Like our son had to work 2 jobs just to pay insurance and his own gas money and all that. And I said, that is the least of the problems our kids will have. Trust me on this. They'll be grateful someday. But the hardest part was a teenage daughter. Both of my kids those teenagers having to go, all of them having to go through those years without a mother. And I remember they came to visit me and they were really, really struggling. And I looked at our daughter and she was depressed. And it was heartbreaking because I had seen her when I left, she was a happy kid. And I'm watching her go through her teenage years very depressed. And I looked at her and I said, Sadie, I did this to you. I am so sorry you're hurting. Tell me how I hurt you. And she said, Mom, I don't even want to talk to you anymore. You know, she was so hurt, which she had every right to be. And I remember going back to my bunk and I just laid there and man, I was hurting so much. And I would envision someday everything would be okay. Like, we're going to get there. I actually listened to music and I imagined my children healthy on the other side of this. And I knew we had to start with truth. They had to hear the truth from me. And we had this opportunity to go to Hawaii with our family in January. And it was so beautiful because I was sitting out there watching our daughter dance and laugh with our grandkids. Was what I envisioned the whole time I was in prison. It was like this full circle moment of beauty for us. I believe that my choice to work on me, which was kind of the only thing I could do in prison, but I chose it. There were a lot of people that didn't, has impacted my children in a positive way. I have to believe that because I was absent for so many years. Like, they had to grieve those years. I grieved those years. We didn't have those years together, but I did the only thing I could do. And that was get myself in the best place I could. And because of that, they have me as a foundation and an example. And that's the best I could do. So it's taken time. Our kids trust me. I think they're proud of me. I show up in their lives. I do what I say I'll do. They have a father who loves them, who loves their mother. In fact, I had a moment with our son where he was trying to tell me that another man that he knows is my sister's husband, and he makes a lot of money and does a lot of good things. And I said, your father got your mother and took care of his children while I was in prison. I go, you have the greatest father, the father that's the best example. And he goes, I know I do. I said, don't think, that. And I feel that our kids have a great legacy because we chose not to give up. I feel that.
That's so awesome.
Is it weird here? I've never met either one of you before.
And I'm sitting here crying.
But I just feel impressed to say I just feel a lot of love right now for both of you. And because we're touching on very vulnerable points in your life. And I just love both of you. I don't know.
Vulnerability creates connection, deep connection and love. And I think you being that way with your children is part of what helped bridge that gap. Just being vulnerable and truth.
And for Chad, I don't know if you're just made out of steel or not. Maybe you just came this way, right? Maybe.
Kinda.
But I'm thinking, I'm trying to put myself in your place. And it's really hard for me. It's 5 years? Wow.
With 5 kids at home? Is that how many?
And two older.
Two older were married, so it was really the 3 of us, day to day.
That's still a lot.
And maybe it wasn't hard for you. I don't know. But I know there were moments you said that were hard.
He was pretty depressed. There were times that were pretty tough.
How did you get through this, Chad? What were some of the strengths that you pulled from to get by?
Faith was an important one, faith in God, faith in that things would be better. The vision of having our family together when we were done with it, because I did think about, well, let's see if we, early on, if we did get divorced, we're married, what does that look like? We got step parents and kids. And like, I love Portia and I want our family to be together. So I guess that was the guiding place.
That is as simple as that. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I love your story. It's, I mean, for both of you. Wow.
I would just ask for each of you to share as we start wrapping up here. What is something that you would tell other couples would raise their marriage IQ, their marriage intelligence? What are some things that you, from your life experience, can say, this would make a difference if you would do this?
For me, focus on the good. It's there. And I look to my own weaknesses and try to be fairly honest with myself and Chad when I see them. But I look for Chad's strengths, and you can go either direction, but I look for his strengths. And I think the other thing is you can't imagine how good it can get. Like, it can be so dark and so discouraging and so difficult, but there's beauty on the other side of that if you're willing to stay the course. And when you're in the middle, you don't see the end. You can't imagine that it's going to get as good as it is, but just do the next right thing and focus on your partner's strengths, because if you focus on the weaknesses, they'll continue to appear.
So what about you, Chad? What are your
My
recommendations?
Parting words of advice, wisdom. There was a quote I love is, choose your love and love your choice. It becomes a choice, the feeling you choose what you want. And I have the power to change me, and I have no power to change anyone around me, whether it's my marriage, whether it's anyone. It's just very unlikely that I'm going to be able to change them, but I can change the way I feel about them, the way I treat them, the way I, interact. And that is really, I don't know, those would be the things.
But that choice changes everything. That choice of loving me and believing me, because he chose that even in my weakness. And then I became the best version of myself. And that's the power that we have, is to see the best in people, and they can rise to that.
That's redemption right there.
I love it.
That's beautiful. So would you tell us where people can find you and learn more about your story?
Yeah. So I've been on Facebook for a while, and I've been on Instagram. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just post stories. And then I wrote my first book. I've written 2 books.
What are the names of the books?
The first book is Living Louder. It's a compassionate journey through federal prison. And then my second book is Born to be Brave, a compassionate journey through life. And they're both available on Amazon and Audible. And then I started a TikTok account. So if you're crazy and you're on TikTok, because I wasn't until about 6 months ago, and that kind of exploded. People love hearing prison stories, I guess. And so I'm on YouTube and TikTok, pretty much every platform. And I just share these little stories. But if you're interested in hearing more of this story, then you would probably want to either listen to the book on Audible or get the book. So
that's great.
Oh, and I have a website, PortiaLouder.com too. There's that.
Portia spelled.
It's Portia. And here's the crazy thing. There's not another Portia Louder in the world. My mom.
So you got it.
I did not like the name Portia when I was a kid because it was so different. But Portia Louder, you can find me. You just Google me and I will pop up.
Louder, right?
Louder, yes. So thanks for giving us this chance to share what I consider our greatest success, which is our marriage.
This has been so wise, so
this is great,
beautiful, and so filled with hope and strength when it could have been exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, folks, that wraps it up for today. We're so grateful to the Louders for spending this day with us, for being vulnerable, and just amazing. We can't thank you enough.
And remember, the intelligent spouse knows that to change from a stinky to a scintillating marriage first requires a change in themselves.
We hope you'll stay connected with us and keep the momentum going from this week. Follow Marriage IQ on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more great content on this topic.
Head over to marriageiq.com to grab your free ebook on building a scintillating marriage, and subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips, updates, and resources.
And then we hope you'll invite your family and friends to join the Marriage IQ community. Keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time on another exciting episode of Marriage IQ.